thanking a few people for making the service possible. First to Browncroft Community Church for their generosity and the use of this beautiful facility. To all the police officers that have come today to honor Jamieson Ritter. To the friends and family that helped with various parts of the service. We don't have time for these events to plan them, and people coming together in just a matter of a few days is just an act of God, so we thank you all for that. Let's pray. Lord, your word says in Psalms 23, yea, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that we will fear no evil, for you, God, are with us. It's your rod and your staff that comfort us. Lord, we ask this morning that you make your word come to life, that your angels surround every corner of this room, that your spirit falls upon every resting soul in this place, that your spirit moves, Lord, that your spirit heals, that your spirit comforts, brings strength to the family, Lord God, to see this day through, Lord. Guide us as we take this time to honor St. Jamieson, Lord. We thank you in your mighty name. Amen. So my name is Joshua Morganti. I've been a friend of the Ritter family for several years, and I've had the honor of being a pastor to some of them as well over the years. And I've been in church ministry for decades. I know I don't look that old, but I've been serving since I was 16, 15, and I got to say, in all my years, this has been the most honorable day that I have ever been a part of church ministry. So I thank the Ritter family for giving me that honor to be able to stand before all of you and open with a brief message. Many people here knew Jamieson. Some didn't. But after today, I can tell you that everyone will know the true heart of who Jamieson was, and more importantly, how great his legacy is and how it will live on forever through the lives of all the people that he had touched. I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about Jamieson. I'm going to share a message of encouragement, and then we'll hear from some of his closest friends and family members. So let's talk a minute about the real Jamieson Ritter. And I have to say the real Jamieson Ritter because he was not one to boast about his personal accomplishments and achievements. He was brilliant. He knew how to get what he wanted. It was natural to him. He could outsmart people while keeping a straight face. It was a gift of many that he never wanted to boast about. There are things that even his closest family members are just learning about him throughout the past week, of all the stories and all the people that have reached out to them to share moments within their lives that Jamieson has touched them. I can tell you that losing somebody, you sometimes feel like you should put some distance between them and that family. Send them emails. Don't show up at their house at 2 a.m. But send them those stories because that provides them so much encouragement. It provides them a deeper bond and connection with their son than they're ever going to get. So you all are part of the healing process for them. At what point, Jamieson was the Officer of the Month at the Cleveland Police Department, and his family didn't even know it. I've also heard stories that he didn't even know it. That's the kind of man we're talking about here today. Bottom line, he cared more about others than he cared about himself. Jamieson Ritter was unfortunately killed in the line of duty while serving and protecting his community as a Cleveland, Ohio police officer. He was a beloved son, brother, a much-loved uncle, a friend and service to his community. He was an avid animal lover and rescuer. I've heard stories upon stories of the animals he'd rescued, but the one that stood out the most was when he was stationed in Syria in 2022 with his team. Staying in his headquarters, he hears some meows from the attic. And instead of calling animal patrol or just ignoring the meows, he decides to climb the rafters of the roof and start meowing at the cats and throwing treats at them, trying to get them to come over to him so he could rescue a few stray cats. He was probably simultaneously thinking how he was going to then FedEx those cats home to John and Karen so they could end up taking care of them with Karen's credit card, which I've also heard many stories about. Laughing's okay, guys, right? I don't know too many people that would risk their life for a cat. That's Jamieson. He was a 2015 graduate from McQuaid, a 2019 graduate from Syracuse University, a member of the Ohio National Guard, where he was deployed in Syria, ultimately returning to his police duties in Cleveland, where he spent his final days serving. Jamieson was always on a mission. If there's one thing that I've learned through these conversations is that he was always on some sort of mission, whether it was to get a new car from his parents or it was to save a cat. It was something. In third grade, he wrote his first mission statement, dated 3/23/06, and I have a copy to prove it. It began with him saying that he wanted to go spread the word and glory of God with the people that he encountered, and ended with him saying he wants to go to heaven. That was his mission statement as a little boy in third grade. He was a believer in Christ, and on July 4th, he was ultimately granted his wish of going to heaven. We could spend days going over his achievements, his accomplishments, telling stories, but it wouldn't even scratch the surface to reveal the character of who he really was. The one constant that I have found in every story, and every person that I've talked to about Jamieson, even stories that I was able to hear last night at the wake, is that just like in his third grade mission statement, he wanted to serve others. And through that, people's lives were changed, left wanting to be a better version of themselves. That's rare. Anyone can get up every day and serve. You can choose to do it, you can choose to push through it, but he did it in a way that was so effective that people said, and I quote, "That man changed my life." That is a different type of servant. He did it from the heart. What we see happening here is a global concept known as servant leadership. It's been around for years. It's been gaining traction like a wildfire recently due to how effective this leadership style is. It's been recognized by Forbes, Time Magazine, Indeed, the Army University Press, the FBI, and more, as one of the most effective styles of leadership to invoke change in those whom we serve. The concept is quite simple. It's leading others through humility. That's the other word that I heard constantly about him, humility. Officer of the Month. Not even going to post that on Facebook. It's crazy. It's an approach that's so effective that Jamieson was able to change the lives of friends, family, coworkers, drug addicts, murderers, and the list goes on. I've heard story after story of every type of person imaginable that this man came into contact with, walking away, changing them to some degree. And sometimes on his day off, going to people that he may have arrested that ended up in the hospital, sitting by their bedside without them even being conscious and knowing he was there, all alone, just because he cared and he wanted to check on them. Never got credit, never made the news. That was a man who cared for others. That's the fruit of a servant leadership, but it's also the fruit of a Christian brother. His parents brought him up in a Christian home, taught him morals and values, which he applied daily, often not even knowing he was representing Christ in his daily actions. The first example we can find of servant leadership dates all the way back to Christ in the Bible. The very man that Jamieson in his third grade mission statement stated he wanted to be just like by spreading the glory of God with the people on earth. Doesn't always look the same for each of us. Doesn't always have to be going around door to door as a missionary. It can be a smile to somebody, sitting at their bedside, a conversation, a hug. He wanted to spread it in any way he could. Jesus lived this concept day in and day out, just as Jamieson did. And in one of Jesus' final moments on earth, in John chapter 13, we see his whole life and ministry come a bit more into focus. Jesus was sharing a meal. It was his final meal, famously known as the Last Supper, with his disciples. several men that had followed him for a long period of time. He was their teacher. They were his followers. He was sitting with them at this table, and then Jesus came over and realized, it says in John 13, that he knew he had the power to do whatever he wanted. He could choose to continue to serve, or he could throw in the towel and take the first ship to Cancun if he wanted to. But he knew in his heart that his time here on earth was short, and he only had a small period of time left. So he made a decision. He was going to serve. So he, in the middle of this dinner with his disciples, gets up, walks away. And I'll tell you, I don't know if you have family dinners, but in my house, I don't like anybody leaving the table until everybody at the table is done, especially when I'm the one who cooked the meal. Sit down, let's be together, let's spend time together. They didn't have TVs and iPads. A dinner meal was important. So for Jesus to stand up and walk away was extremely unorthodox. He walks away, takes off his outer robe, grabs a towel, ties it around his waist, grabs a bucket and a pitcher of water. The disciples are thinking that his fearless leader has just lost their mind. But what he does next sets the stage for servant leadership. He gets down on his knees, and as officers, you know what that position means. Surrender, humility. He got down on his knees and one by one washed his disciples' feet. His disciples are like, what is wrong with you? To put context there, back then they did not wear Air Jordans and walk on cement sidewalks. They were barefoot or wearing sandals on dirt roads or in the mud. The feet were often considered one of the most disgusting parts of your body. And Jesus decided to wash that part of their body. So the disciples are pushing back. Don't, please stop. But he says to them, if you don't let me do this, then you can't be like me. I've heard stories of Jamieson when criminals questioned why he was being so kind to them and loving to them. Like, other officers would have thrown me behind bars, but you had a conversation with me first. He wanted to invoke change. So he washes their feet, sits them all down, and explains to them, you call me Lord, teacher, you find me of high importance. You think of me so highly. But what he says next sets the groundwork for servant leadership that carries the same premises it still does today. He said, I set an example for you, so you should do the same that I have done for you with others. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. That was the life that Jamieson had lived. A life devoted to others, a one of humility, a one with a heart to help anyone and everyone he came into contact with, even if it was a cat. He dealt with people in low places on a daily basis. He took off his shirt and washed their feet with the intent and hopes that they would go out and do the same. He didn't do it for self-credit. He did it because he wanted to make a change in these people's lives. That's how we change the world. That's how we make a third grader's dream and mission statement come true. By spreading the word and glory of God, just as Jesus and Jamieson did with everyone they come into contact with. There's nothing we can do to bring Jamieson back physically. But there's a lot we can do to continue our lives with him spiritually. I can promise you, if you begin to adapt this mentality of servant leadership, then you will feel like you're serving right alongside of him. Sorrow turns to joy when you can find a way to turn disaster into opportunity. My brother James, not to be confused with Jamieson, passed away 5 months ago. And I stood in this very church, right in this area. I had the honor of sharing a message with a room filled with 600 people, and lives were changed after that service. The Ritter family stood alongside of us during that period of time, just as we're standing with them today. They were moved by my brother's message so much that they reached out to us to stand with them. So through my brother's passing, I've been able to pass that torch on to them. Here I am again with the greatest honor that I ever had in ministry. And now I fully believe that the Ritter family is going to have the opportunity to do the same for another family in the future. We can look at death as a loss, or we can look at as an opportunity or a purpose. There's one more thing that I feel compelled to share with you all before I close. It's a word that a lot of people I feel really need to hear right now. The word's forgiveness. Jamieson's death was not an accident. It was intentional and terrible. But in order for every one of us in this room to be able to reconcile, to heal and experience peace in this situation, I'm telling you, you must learn to forgive when you're ready. It will, for some, be the most difficult thing you will ever have to do in your lives. John, if I was in your seat, I couldn't imagine. We often, however, misinterpretation of forgiveness as acceptance. They don't mean the same thing. I'm not suggesting we approve or accept by any means what has happened. Forgiveness is not acceptance. Forgiveness is not the acceptance of sin, it's freedom from sin's negative effect on our lives. That's what forgiveness is. It's more for us, for the freedom from the situation than it does for anybody else. And that's a global concept. In Matthew 6:14, Jesus said, "For if you forgive others their sins, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, neither will your Father forgive your sins." Unforgiveness will place a barrier between you and God's grace. We will do plenty of things in our lives that will make us look up to the heavens, whether you're a believer or not, and ask God for forgiveness. Ask God for grace, because you have nowhere else to look. But if we cannot forgive others, it can block us from receiving God's own forgiveness to us. Again, forgiveness leads to freedom. That is the very reason Jamieson was able to serve the way he was. He looked past the shell of the people that he dealt with every day and was able to look straight into their hearts. He loved others just as Christ loves each of us. Finally, I'm also talking about some of you in the room today that need to forgive yourselves. Many of you today are carrying a burden that is not yours to carry through this tragedy. Could I have done something more to have prevented this? Could I have prayed more? Could I have been by his side that night? If only he moved back to Rochester 6 months earlier, this would have never happened. I am sure the list goes on, and I'm sure there's people that have that burden in their mind, in their heart, right as I speak. And that is the Spirit, putting it on your heart and mind because he wants to get rid of it. I can tell you that what you're feeling and that burden you're feeling is a lie from Satan, whether you believe it or not. I can tell you firsthand. If the enemy can keep you in a place of self-torment, it will render you ineffective to those around you. When I look at this crowd, I see a room full of fighters. I've never experienced anything like watching you police officers, watching you walk in this room. Incredible. Absolutely incredible what you have to do every single day. You are servants. You were not created to be rendered ineffective. Let's not give the devil any more due than he is already trying to take. God wants to take the burden from each and every one of you. All you have to do is submit your heart and your mind to him. Accept that he is in control and you are not. And I promise you that if you do that, you will feel the burden lifted off your shoulders physically. It will simply feel gone. I can also promise promise you that you will only find temporary relief from the things the world has to offer to help you cope with this situation. Drugs, alcohol, food. All the areas that we tend to turn to for comfort will only provide you a temporary relief. You will end up feeling more empty than where you were when you first started. I can tell you from personal experience and the testimony of hundreds of thousands of others that faith is the only thing that will bring you the comfort that you are looking for right now. Romans 14:8 says, if we live, we live for the Lord. If we die, we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. Jamieson believed in the sovereignty of God. Every time he prayed, he did it to a God whom he knew was in control. There's nothing we can do to change the will of God. When it's our time, it's our time. But there is one thing that we can do to change that: ourselves. Through our own personal transformation, God will give us opportunities to transform those around us, just as Jamieson did every day. If you want to bring him back, carry on his mission as if he never left. Let his legacy live on through your choices. Serve humbly, wash feet, forgive, lay your burdens down at the cross, and bring the glory of God to the whole earth. Jamieson was not just part of the police force and National Guard. He was also part of God's army. In the police force, promotion comes with hard work, loyalty, and success. But in God's army, death is the ultimate promotion. Jamieson is home. He's not in pain. He's not in sorrow. He's where he's wanted to be since the 3rd grade. In heaven with Christ, his teacher, his mentor, and his hero that will never be fallen. I want to thank you for allowing me to share that message. I want to invite up Jack Schwab next, Jamieson's best friend, to share.